It's showtime, folks.
Absolute Cinema. Welcome back to the channel. Justin Lynch Bioc Memes here, back for another video. Today I thought we'd go through Connor Bedard's season, kind of a bit of a season recap, overall thoughts on how he did this year, the offseason coming up, things to, keep a lookout, things to watch, storylines to keep track of, and just overall synopsis and expectations for next year and kind of where he's at right now. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do this for every Blackhawks player. Well, no, I'm not going to do this for every Blackhawks player, but I figured the notable core guys, the guys that are going to be a part of this thing for the long haul, the core group that's being assembled are Kyle Davidson, the Frank Nazars, the Spencer Knights, Bedards, players like that. We're not going to do, every single player. I don't think Andre Burakovsky needs a season recap, but yeah, just kind of going through their seasons and kind of what to expect for next year in terms of where they're at with the team. So yeah, looking at Bedard's season here today, I think overall hypothesis before I kind of get into this, no, I think Bedard took a major step forward this year. I think he had a much better season this year compared to his sophomore season. I think we could all agree didn't really go to plan. It wasn't necessarily a bad year, but just it wasn't as good as many had pegged as expected. It was a tough Blackhawks year, not just for him, for the whole team. The team didn't perform, and he just didn't quite take that step forward that we expected after a really impressive rookie season where he won the Calder Trophy pretty unanimously. And he had a very impressive rookie season on another shitty Blackhawks team. So it kind of just flatlined. I wouldn't say he regressed. A lot of people said he regressed, in his sophomore year. I don't think that was the case. But he didn't take that step forward. He didn't get better. He kind of just flatlined. This year, I think it's fair to say Bedard got considerably better. He took that step forward. It was a leap forward at the start of the year, then became kind of a step as the year went along after his season kind of was halted due to injury. Definitely a tale of two seasons. Definitely a tale of two seasons at Bedard. But no, I think overall this year is a teaser trailer, right? It is a bit of a teaser in terms of what to expect with him, what he can do, the player he can be for this franchise moving forward. I think he showed if there are any doubts about, his franchise, potential generational status, heading into this past season. I think he called a lot of those doubts and I think just gave us a lot of excitement in terms of what to expect from the future. Because I think the scary thing is a Bedard, it feels like he's only scratched the surface of what he can do. That's a scary thing. It feels like there's just so much more in his tank. There's so much more levels to his game that we haven't even seen yet because he still has a lot of room for improvement, which isn't a bad thing. He's 20 years old. He still has a lot of areas to get better and to improve. But I think that's a fun thing with him is just to be able to kind of track this guy and see how much better he can get. But yeah, I'll pull up his kind of his stats here. We'll just kind of go through his season here. First off here, yeah, here's his career stats here. Let me move over here. Yeah. Yeah, so obviously rookie year was very good. 22 goals, 39 assists, 61 points, 68 games. Won the Calder Trophy that year. There were some Wild fans who delusionally thought that Brock Faber should win it that year, but no, Bedard was clearly the best rookie that season. Did have his campaign derailed a bit due to injury with the broken jaw that year they sustained against the Devils. But no, overall, it was a very solid season for Bedard on a very bad Blackhawks team. He had a nice chemistry with Phil Kurashev that year, which shows you just how much, support he had to work with. Especially those early years. Really, throughout his first 3 years, he hasn't really had an elite line mate, elite teammate to work with. But it does look to be changing slowly but surely here. It looks like he'll be getting that support around him. It's slowly but surely coming. What made Bedard's life difficult his first couple of years in the show is just he came onto this team at the start of the rebuild, right? Kane Toews kind of arrived towards the end of the rebuild. We already had guys like Keith Seabrook, Sharp here. A lot of that core was already assembled, whereas Bedard showed up before really anybody else. Korchinski also played his rookie year, but then he spent the last 2 years in Rockford. But Frank Nazar didn't show up until, not last year, before last year. Frandell didn't show up till the end of this past season. A lot of those defensemen didn't show up till this past season, end of last season. So Oliver Moore as well. So a lot of these guys that are going to be a supporting cast as running mates, he hasn't really had, to work with for the majority of his career thus far, but that will be changing, especially next year. That will be changing. But yeah, and I think sophomore year, he didn't really quite take that step, kind of flatline, like I said. 23 goals, 44 assists, 67 points in 82 games. So Bedard was clearly just a trendsetter. I think he was onto the 6-7. He was onto that trend before anybody else. So Bedard just wanted to get ahead of the curve there. But this past season, 30 goals, 45 assists, 75 points in 69 games. Nice. Another year, unfortunately, impacted with an injury. He missed 13 games this year, so very similar to his rookie year, and he missed 14. No injuries his sophomore year. That was the one positive sophomore year. No, he wasn't hurt. Played all 82 games. And this past season, unfortunately, had another injury this time, separated shoulder there. So fractured shoulder, I guess, whatever we want to call it. But didn't get surgery just after the rehab. It missed a month, about the similar time frame as rookie year. But definitely, had that hot start to the season. When he came back from injury, wasn't quite the same. Kind of looked more like he did the previous season. But no, still overall, even with the injury impacting his year, still 30 goals, 45 assists, 75 points in 69 games, which are career highs across the board in terms of goals, assists, points. That's 75 goals, 120 assists, 203 points in 219 games so far in Bedard's career. So just under a point per game on Blackhawks teams that have finished 31st, bottom two in each of his first 3 seasons. They have seen some improvement points-wise. The Blackhawks had 52 points his rookie year, 61 points his second year, 72 points last year. So the Hawks have improved by 20 points in Bedard's first 3 years, but still modest improvement points wins-wise, but standings-wise, no improvement, unfortunately. But we're knocking on the door. Hopefully next year could be more of a leap forward versus a jump forward. But and yeah, he's also made some strides. I think this past year he showed it. His defensive game got a lot better. His plus-minus not quite as hard to look at. Minus 44 his rookie year, minus 36 year 2. Minus 18 this past year. So he made some strides from the defensive game this year. I know plus-minus only tells you so much, but it's something to go off of. Something of Bedard, too, is he's quietly become a bit of a pest as well. He only had 28 penalty minutes his rookie year, but had 70 penalty minutes his sophomore year, because a lot of that was due to those 10-minute misconducts he kept getting from the refs. Then he had 50 this past year. I think he's been second in the Blackhawks in penalty minutes the past 2 seasons. So he's definitely got a bit of a snarl to his game. He plays with a lot of edge, a lot of intensity, aggression, which is nice to see out of your core player right there, your number one center. You want to see that. Not that you want to see Bedard in a lot of those scrums, though, because you don't want to see him risk injury. And there's other guys on the team you'd rather see, in those scrums and kind of laying those hits and kind of, being aggressive from that standpoint. But still, it's good to see that Bedard has an arsenal work. If he has to step up for himself, he can. So you saw a lot of that this past year. Bedard definitely showed a bit of a more physical side to his game that we haven't really seen much of yet. So, and yeah, he made some strides as well. He worked on his, shot a lot. Shot percentage has gone up, 10.7 rookie year, 11.8 last year. He had a lot of bad luck last year. 13.3 this past season. It was definitely a lot higher than that first half of the year. But yeah, no, I think Bedard, he worked on a lot of things over the offseason. I think the biggest thing you notice kind of right out of the jump, but we'll go to the game logs here so we get a better idea of kind of how his whole overall season played out. We'll go to October here. But I think right away from the start of the year, you could tell Bedard found an extra step. I think the biggest thing for him to work on last offseason was his speed, because, he was pretty slow his first couple of years. Skating wasn't really his strong suit. Not to say he's a bad skater. He's pretty graceful, good edge work. He gets around, but just not really. The speed wasn't quite there. The acceleration wasn't quite there. Bedard worked in that a ton over the offseason. He decided to skip the World Championships last year, which he got a lot of flack for at the time, but the thought was a longer offseason, spent more time spent, kind of working on his own, training over the summertime. He spent a lot of time, if you look back to last summer, there were a lot of clips of him circulating, seeing the improvements he made of his speed. He worked on his stride, worked on his mechanics there, and definitely saw a lot of progress at that standpoint. I think right away, game 1 of the season, even preseason, you could already tell how much quicker he got, found quite a couple extra miles per hour there. I think his top speed this year is 22, 23 miles per hour, which is 1 to 2 miles per hour quicker than his first couple of years. So Bedard found a couple extra steps in his stride, got a lot quicker. I think that helped him out a ton, especially for a guy Bedard who gets so many rush chances. There are not many players in the National Hockey League that have generated more rush chances the last couple of years than Connor Bedard. If he could work on his finishing out, that'll go a long way there. But yeah, I think the fact that he's been able to help kind of improve his speed, it's kind of helped to where he can, finish more on those chances and, take advantage of more of those opportunities. So especially when he doesn't quite have those running mates to kind of help him bury those chances. So I think that helped him out a ton. But Dick, it's funny. The start of the year was good. It didn't quite happen right away. It was a bit of a, now I want to say slow start to the year, but, October was good. First half of the month, it took him a bit to kind of get going there. But towards the end of the month, though, is when he really started to humming there. He had a multi-point game. It only took him a couple games to get his first goal, which kind of been the case for Bedard. I think his rookie year, game 2, he had his first of the year. Sophomore year, I think it was game 3, and this year was game 2 once again against the Boston Bruins. First multi-point game, game 2. He had a 3-assist game versus St. Louis in that 8-3 game that we blew him out in October, the Bedzar Masterclass. That was a fun game. But as you can see here, decent start to the year. How much was it? 6, 7, 9. I think he had 9 points his first 9, 10 games, something like that. I think Frank Nazar had 10 points his first 10 games. So him and Nazar are kind of clipping around a similar rate that first part of the season in October. Frank Nazar, honestly, the month of October, I thought was the Blackhawks' best player. We'll do something on Nazar as well. But Nazar as well, another guy who had his season impacted by injury, injured in December like Bedard was, broken jaw like Bedard had his rookie year. Nazar had a broken jaw this past year, and that kind of derailed his season because first half of the year Nazar was really hot. Second half, definitely not quite as hot. But now that's a future video. We'll talk about Frank Nazar another time. We're talking about Bedard today. I'm trying not to get off track too much, but yeah, towards the end of this month though, you really start to see Bedard get humming. He had his first career hat trick against Ottawa there, late October. He had a 4-point game. First career hat. He took him 3 years, a little longer than expected. We had to wait for it, but that was a great game. One of the best games of the Blackhawks season, 7-3 dud there. And he had the month of October with 6 goals, 8 assists, 14 points in 11 games, I believe, if my math is correct. Math was never my strong suit. Yes, 14 points, 11 games. So yeah, very strong first month of the season for Bedard. You could definitely see him start to kind of break out there, start to get confident, start to get hot, generating plenty of chances. Especially like he had such good chemistry there. It's easy to forget. Andre Burakovsky had such a brutal season, especially second half of the year was nowhere to be seen. Was just a kind of a liability out there. Never got him a score sheet. Hoping he gets bought up this offseason. But first half of the year, though, Burakovsky was very good. I think a big part of it, too, is Bedard was that good to where he could kind of elevate those guys around him to make them look better than they are. But yeah, Burakovsky, first month of the year was very good. First couple months of the year was very good. That Bedard, Green, Burakovsky line was humming. The 2025 portion of the year. 2026 portion, not so much, but 2025 portion of the year, that line had some very nice chemistry there, some good jump, which was something Bedard, he didn't have quite a lot of that his first couple of years, especially under Luke Richardson. He'd be playing with, multiple different line combinations throughout the year. Hardly had any chemistry, consistency with the line mates. This past year, there's much more of that. There was a lot more consistency, so I think that probably helped him out a ton as well, though maybe not so much the second half of the year when there probably should have been more changes, but we'll get to that later. But no, October was a good start to the year for Bedard, but it's really the month of November where he really took off. November was absolute cinema month for Connor Bedard. He absolutely cooked. As you can see, a 10-game point streak right here. Really good start to the month here. He had that 4-point game against Calgary where he had probably his nicest goal of the year, that strip play on Morgan Frost, and then that beautiful 1-2 move on Dustin Wolf in that game. It was a very beautiful goal. He had quite a few nice goals this season. I think you could argue that was the nicest one. Had a 3-point game against Detroit there too. 4 straight games of a goal here from Vancouver to Jersey. He had a goal in his hometown Vancouver as well, which is nice to see. It was empty netter, but who cares? 10-game point streak, I believe, from LA to New Jersey here. I believe that was a 10-game point streak, not mistaken. 9-game point streak, pretty close. Math was a little off there, but yeah. And then he gets his second career hat trick. Less than a month after his first one, he had a hat trick against the Flames midway through the month. So yeah, it took him 3 years to get his first hat trick, and immediately has 2 in the first couple months of the season. Absolutely humming there. Multiple hatties for Bedard. You could kind of tell, like, once you got that first one, you had a feeling the next one was like you wouldn't have to wait too long for it, right? Just the confidence that Bedard showed for his first couple months of the year were like, okay, like he has arrived. And like Bedard, to be fair, had a lot to play for this year. Last year 3 of his entry-level contract. Olympic year. Obviously he wants to play for Team Canada. He missed out on the 4 nations. He doesn't want to miss out on the Olympics. Unfortunately, he does miss out on the Olympics, which if not for an injury, he probably makes it. But yeah, I think the way Bedard played those first couple months of the year, he absolutely was an Olympic-level player. His production was right there with Macklin Celebrini. Easy to forget that, man. No Celebrini end of the year for 115 points. Ted Trophy, not nominee there. Very strong season for Celebrini. Only Kucherov, McDavid, and McKinnon had more points than him in the entire NHL. Bedard was playing right with him. Those first couple months of the year before he got injured, Bedard was right with Celebrini when it comes to production, points per game. He was right with him. Unfortunately, the injury happened, and then he came back second half of the year, and the game fell off a bit. But yeah, first couple months of the year, Bedard was easily This was easily the best hockey of his career. November, October was the best hockey we've seen out of Bedard so far in his young Blackhawks NHL career. And I think gave us a taste of what's to come. Like, I think this is the Bedard, this part of the year when he was fully healthy, start of the season. That's the Bedard that you could come to expect from this point forward, right? Not to play the hypothetical game, but yeah, like, how does the season go if he doesn't get injured? Because you look at this, like, he keeps cooking in November. Last game of the month is his outstanding 4-point game versus the Anaheim Ducks. That was the game where he was chirping Mason McTavish, his former World Junior teammate there. And one of his nicer goals as well. He had that nice, that kind of Showtime special Patrick King goal on Billy Husso in that game. 4-point game, which I couldn't believe when I was looking back in the game logs here. This game in November 30th versus the Ducks in the black jerseys, only Blackhawks win the black jerseys all year, was actually the last game that Bedard had more than 2 points in a game all season. He had multiple games with more than 2 points, in the first couple months. He had one versus the Ducks, one versus the Flames. He had one versus the Wings, another one versus the Flames, one versus the Senators, the game he had his first hat trick, and one versus the Blues. So what is that? 5, 3-point or more games the first 2 months of the year. But this is the last game that he had more than 2 points in a game. He had a few more multi-point games, but no more than 2 for the rest of the year. And the big reason for that is unfortunately the injury happens in December. But before we get to that, yeah, November, absolutely, probably his best month, easily his best month in the NHL. 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points in the month of November. How many games is that? Do some quick math here. I believe that is 13 games. Yeah, 23 points in 13 games. So that's 37 points in his first 24 games of the year, which is well over a 100-point pace. Like what, 120-ish points over point pace over a full 82 games, I believe. So absolutely, outstanding first couple months of the year for Bedard, which he needed. Because look, it's easy to forget how much the media was on this guy's first couple of years in the show, especially his sophomore year. There was a lot of people claiming, is he really that generational franchise player that the Hawks thought they got with the first overall pick? His sophomore year, he didn't quite take that step, and there was a lot of Bedard had a lot of criticism from the NHL media. In his 24-25 season, there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of pressure on him, especially I think heading into this season to kind of right the ship, have a bounce back campaign. And first couple months, first half of the year, he was absolutely doing that. I think he was putting a lot of those critics to bed and was showing, no, he is that guy. And, was putting it upon himself. He didn't have the help around him. It's not like this team made a lot of changes over the summer, right? It was, a younger team, but for the most part, very similar roster construction compared to the previous year. Bedard was still taking that step without those elite line mates around him, which just, which goes to show. Those best players, they don't need that elite support. They elevate guys around him. Bedard was doing that. First half of the season. But yeah, December, got to a good start as well. He's playing well. Probably his nicest goal of the year is that one versus Vegas. That goal on Carter Hart there, where he went top titty Bardowski on Carter Hart. Very beautiful goal. He had a nice shootout goal in that game as well. He has a bit of a streak here. But yeah, fortunately, is this game right here, December 12th versus St. Louis, where his season, the Blackhawks season, goes off the rails. Fluke shoulder injury there in that game. The frustrating thing about the injury is, the game was over. It was a late icing with like 0.1 seconds left on the clock. The game was over. Hawks lost the game, pulled the goalie there. There's a late draw to try to win a face-off and maybe get a shot off the draw. Maybe there's a chance for one more opportunity there, but hindsight 2020, Bedard just probably should have been taking that draw in the first place. It's an unnecessary risk, and unfortunately, it was an awkward collision there where, with Braden Shen, the stick kind of, hitting him in an awkward area there, landed awkwardly, and unfortunately, yeah, that was enough to kind of, to aggravate the shoulder there and put him out for a month's play. So that derailed his season up to this point, December 12th versus the Blues. Bedard had 44 points in 31 games. I believe it was 19 goals, 25 assists. So 44 points, 31 games. They'll do some quick math here. And that's well over a 100-point pace. I believe that's 120-point pace, if I'm not mistaken. So he was right with their Celebrini, man. He was up there. At one point in this early on in the season, he had the most points in the NHL. I believe it was after this game versus Calgary. I think he had the most points in the NHL with 31. So yeah, that's the first 3 months of the year. October through December 2025, Bedard was, he was an elite player, man. He was a star. He was breaking out. He was amongst the best players. You could argue the best player in the NHL this first couple months of the year. But unfortunately, this game versus the Blues, fluke injury, unfortunately derails his season, which that's something to monitor too for Bedard. 3 seasons in his career, so far 2 of them impacted by injuries. So that's something there to work on. I think he could keep kind of putting on a bit of weight there. Bedard, is in very good shape. He's a smaller player in terms of he's not the tallest, but what is he? 5'11", 190, whatever it is, 185. But probably could still put on some weight there and get a bit tougher. Probably put some bone on there because look, he's your generational player. He's your star player. You don't want to see Bedard missing games every year. I think this team's going to go as far as Bedard takes him. So I think something to work on is improving his durability to where he's not missing games. He's kind of avoiding those injuries. To be fair, a couple of them have been pretty fluky. Like this one was pretty fluky. I think the run he had his rookie year versus the Devils was avoidable. Scamped the middle of the ice with his head down. I think that was an avoidable injury. This one, I think, was more fluky. It didn't really have much to do with him. But still, even looking back on that, watching that play, it's hard to believe that that small incident, put him out for a month. Like, it didn't look that bad initially, but you could tell from Bedard's reaction though that it was bad, and you could tell he was in quite a bit of pain. Unfortunately, yeah, it caused him to miss a lot of time. And not only did it derail, his season, it derailed the Blackhawks season. We go over here and we check in on how the Blackhawks are doing at that point. Let's go to December 12th here. Let's forget, this was not just a tale of two seasons for the Blackhawks, but really it was a tale of two seasons for Connor Bedard, because the Blackhawks, the first 3 months of the year, were in that playoff conversation. I mean, December 12th here, they had a 13-12-6 record. They were above 500 hockey team. They were in that wild card mix. I believe they had the second wild card spot after Utah. So they're in that playoff mix. They had a similar record as the San Jose Sharks did. And the Sharks, they didn't lose Brady for a month, right? They didn't lose, well, I guess Smith did have an injury. But yeah, the Hawks obviously, it wasn't just Bedard. They lost Frank Nazar for a month's play. He missed even more time than Bedard. So yeah, this game unfortunately, derailed not just Bedard's year, but the Blackhawks here. They were without him for a month's play, and the team suffered. They lost a lot of games. And kind of fell off the tracks there. By the time Bedard comes back, they're below 500 and out of the playoff spot. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a tale of two seasons. We go back to 2026 here. Bedard does come back, pretty early on in the year. He missed, pretty early on in the campaign. 2026 portion of the year. He's cleared to play. January 9th versus the Capitals. There he comes back, and unfortunately, December 31st, that Canada unveils before I get to January. December 31st, so end of 2025, leading into 2026. Team Canada unveils their Olympic rosters, and unfortunately, Connor Bedard was not on it, which based on the way Bedard played, up to that point in the season, he should have been. Like, he was amongst, easily not just, among Canada's best players in the NHL, but among the best players in the NHL, period. So Bedard should have been the team. I have to think that the World Champion decision the year prior probably had something to do with it. He did have the injury. The team claimed the injury didn't have much to do with it. Doug Armstrong and the Canadian staff claimed that the injury didn't factor in their decision, which I don't fully believe that. I have to think the injury probably had something to do with it, because we come back, Bedard comes back to play here in 2026, and it wasn't quite the same. You could tell, he spent some time to rehab that shoulder, but you could tell it wasn't fully healed. He wasn't quite having that same jump in his step they had at the start of the year. The speed wasn't quite there. The finishing wasn't quite there. And, January's first month back was tough. Again, for any player you miss time, it's going to be tough. It's going to take some time to kind of get back into that rhythm, right? Because you're in that rhythm of, showing up to practice every day and playing these games with the team, traveling with the team, and, missing a month's time is going to get you out of your rhythm. So, you're going to come back and be a bit rusty. So, Bedard comes back, and he's not quite the same player he was at the start of the year. The month of January here, probably his worst month of the year. He had 3 goals and 5 assists, and what is this, 11 games? 11 games here, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. So, and the team, wasn't playing very good as well. So it wasn't just Bedard who wasn't the same. The team wasn't the same as well. I think Nazar didn't come back until later this month as well. They were without him for a while too. So yeah, you could tell that the team of Bedard just wasn't quite the same. This is around the same time that Burakovsky's game starts trailing up as well. Burakovsky was Bedard's most consistent line mate this year, and he was good, during this portion of the year, but what's the count up to 2026? I don't know what it is. Burakovsky just forgot to play hockey, and for some reason, Blashill decided, you know what? Even though he's clearly struggling on Bedard's wing, and Bedard could probably use another player up there, we're just gonna keep rolling Burakovsky up there. And I like Ryan Green, but just not a first line player, right? So Bedard's playing with effectively a third line player in Ryan Green and Andre Burakovsky, who was by far the Blackhawks' worst player of the second half of the year. So the line mates didn't help him either. I think the rust didn't help, missing a month's play. I imagine the Olympic decision probably didn't help either. I mean, technically, he was one of Canada's reserves, so if he did have a very good month here, maybe if there's injuries that took place, maybe he could have been one of the late additions to Canada's Olympic roster, but he wasn't, because his game in January wasn't the same as it was at the start of the year. So from that standpoint, you could say the injury maybe did impact his Olympic decision there. If he doesn't get injured, maybe he does make the Olympic team. Who knows? We'll never know. We'll never know what happens if Bedard doesn't get injured. Does he play for Team Canada in the Olympics? Do the Blackhawks kind of stay in that playoff hunt for longer in the year? Do they end up selling at the deadline during the playoff conversation? Do they finish in a similar spot as the Sharks in the standings, and do they end up jumping in the lottery like they do and get a top 2 pick? Because that's the frustrating thing, man. So the Blackhawks game falls off. They finish bottom 2, and yet they get the 4th pick. And the Sharks, who finished 14 points ahead of them, actually end up jumping the 2nd pick. But anyway, that's why the draft lottery system exists, right? It technically exists to kind of stop teams from tanking, but I don't think it really accomplishes that goal. It just creates a bunch of randomness. But anyway, getting back to here. But yeah, Bedard and Nazar are back here. They played a bit together here. They didn't play much together this year. Bedard and Nazar typically were separated this year. Bedard first line to center, Nazar second line center. They played a little bit together this period here. February, obviously, there wasn't much to go off of here because it was the Olympic break. So Bedard, unfortunately, Bedard should have been playing some more hockey this month. Bedard should have been playing some more hockey for Team Canada in the month of February, but unfortunately, politics and outside factors, he was left off the team. And I think that decision went, I think that definitely, that went on to bite Canada because, they ended up losing the gold to Team USA in the gold medal game. I think they probably could have used Bedard in that game because, they had a lot of chance in that game. They had a 5-on-3 power play at one point, overtime. I think a player of Bedard's skill, that guy who could drive his own line. I don't know. I think Bedard could have come in handy on the second line for Team Canada there, right? Because they had that amazing first line of McKinnon, McDavid, Celebrini, but that line kind of carried that team. I think Bedard in that second line would have done a lot of good there, but I guess so. We'll never know what could have happened. But I think USA, they're laughing to the bank. They're laughing to the bank that they decided to leave Bedard off the team because he should have been there. He should have been there, absolutely. But yeah, not much to go off of in February. There's Olympic break, so three more weeks without hockey for Bedard, which maybe wasn't a bad thing considering he's still kind of rehabbing that shoulder. So he has 3 more weeks there to kind of heal and recover. He comes back here, and to be fair, to start off, I think post-Olympic break, Bedard looked pretty damn good. I think he was probably pretty, motivated. I think he had a point to prove. The fact that he, was on the couch for 3 weeks when he probably should have been in the Olympics. I think he had a point to prove, especially if Canada end up, losing. I think if you're Bedard, you want to play as good as you can and make him regret the decision, right? Take it personally. Michael Jordan, the last chance. Take it personally, Bedard. But yeah, he had goals his first couple games back there. I went to that road trip there, that first road trip back. He looked pretty good right away out of the stretch, got on the board in multiple games. And then the trade deadline takes place. The trade deadline takes place in between Utah and Winnipeg, right? And the Blackhawks sell. They end up trading all of their old leadership group of Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, and Connor Murphy. The month of March and the month of April, the Blackhawks are the youngest team in the league because, as we know, Frundell and Boisvert come, late March, early April. And this is a very young Blackhawks team, right? Some guys like from Rockford are called up too, like Kevin Korchinski and Nick Lardis, etc. Sam Renzel. So it's a very young Blackhawks team. These last couple months of the season. So as you can expect, there'd be a lot of growing pains there. But no, Bedard, month of March was pretty good. Up and down month, I should say. But I'd say the first half was very good. He cooked Utah in this little stretch here. The Hawks had multiple wins against Utah. For some reason, the Hawks end up sweeping Utah this year, which is, is pretty interesting there. But yeah, Bedard had his third career overtime winner versus Utah. In this game, I think Nazar won the game before as well. Hawks swept Utah in the 4 games they played them this year, which if there's one little thing to look at this past season, the Hawks did match up well against the teams that you want to see them match up, well against. In terms of they beat the Sharks 2 out of 3 times. They swept the Utah Mammoth. I believe they beat the Ducks 2 out of 3 times. So a lot of those teams that the Hawks are going to be, they're going to have to deal with, throughout this as they come out of this rebuild and enter this contending stage. Hawks match up pretty well against them. So if there's a silver lining there, if there's something, I know that's maybe fishing a bit there, but that is something that's good to see because look at a team like Utah. Look at the strides they made this year. Certainly themselves as a playoff team. Look at the strides that team like Anaheim made, in the playoffs right now. Look at the strides that San Jose made. They missed the playoffs, but they took that step. There's a lot of, other teams that have been rebuilding that were, started the rebuild earlier than the Blackhawks that made that jump this year. The Blackhawks were making that jump before their season was derailed, Bedard's injury. But yeah, I think that gives us a lot of hope to where the Hawks can make that jump next year, right? There's no reason they can't. Why can't the Hawks have a season like the Sharks had next year? Why can't they be in the mix? Why can't they potentially make a jump to the playoffs like the Ducks did, right? Look at the Sabres this past year. I mean, they had a brutal start to the year in October, November, and then, they made that general manager change, and suddenly the month of December onwards, they're the hottest team in the NHL, and then look at them in the playoffs right now. Look at the Canadians. They didn't start the rebuild that much, earlier than the Blackhawks, and they've been a playoff team the past 2 seasons, so I don't think this Blackhawks team is as far away as people think, and I think if Bedard can keep taking those steps forward and have the season he had next year for full year that he had the 2025 portion of the year before he got injured, I see no reason why the Blackhawks can't make that jump next year with more youth talent coming in, with an offseason to work with to make this team better. Hopefully another one more good draft call as well, and that's gonna help this team out a ton as well. But those are greater points. Now don't we have to do as much of this video. Getting back to the month of March here, but yeah, for Bedard, like I said, it was an up and down. It was up and down month. I think first half of the month was pretty hot. Slowed down a bit the second half of the month, right? The team is getting younger here. Frundell comes in versus the Islanders, which is good to see. Frundell looked very good. Arguably the Blackhawks' best player, I'd say late March, early April. Boisvert comes in as well. I believe he came in. Which of the games did he come in? I believe it was versus the Flyers. He came in one of those games. But yeah, this end of the season didn't quite go the way the Blackhawks wanted. Right, it was a very young team. There's a lot of growing pains here. I think maybe fatigue maybe was catching up to a young team as well. As a lot of these teams are ready to go for the playoffs, and Hawks have a team with an average age of 24, 25. They're icing out there. So yeah, I think this year, towards the end, you can kind of see, this you can kind of tell the year could end soon enough for this Blackhawks team. Bedard's game kind of chill off a bit as well towards the end. April is okay; it's about a point per game, I think. But no goals, as you can see here, no goals. He did have 7.7 games in April, but no goals. I think he won his last what? He won his last 10 games without a goal, which you don't love to see that. 10-game goalless drought there then the year. You don't love to see that. But still, despite that, he still ends the year with 30 goals, 45 assists, 75.69 games, which if over a full 82-game season, I believe that's 89-point pace. So we'll call it 90. 90-point pace for Bedard over a full 82 games if he's fully healthy. And that's factor in the fact that he played half the season, over half the season compromised, right? He played half the season not really fully healthy with a compromised shoulder. And on a team that's, amongst the worst in the NHL, that's amongst the youngest in the NHL, and without any, really elite line mates to work with, right? He doesn't have the support that Celebrini has. He doesn't really have, because him and, Celebrini and the Sharks, like, him and Will Smith play together pretty much all the time, whereas, Bedard and Nazar, they're mostly separated, right? They play together oftentimes in, special teams power play, but otherwise, even straight, they don't really play together a ton, right? So Bedard's, his help, he has what? Ryan Green, Andre Burakovsky, those are the guys he played with for most of the year. A little bit Bertuzzi, a little bit of Nazar here and there, but not a ton. But yeah, and whereas you look at Mac with Celebrini, he's got, he had Will Smith there, right? He had William Eklund, and he had quite a bit more support around him there. So, and he didn't have, a shoulder injury that put him out for a month and impacted, half his season. So, but yeah, getting back to Bedard here, still, even with, the second half of the year not going the way you would have liked, because look, I mean, before we got injured, Bedard had 44 points, 31 games. The ends year 75 and 69, which my math is correct. 75 minus 44, 31. 69 minus 31, 38. So Bedard had 31 points his last 38 games of the year, which I believe is 62 points over 76. So Bedard's second half of the year production, 2026, pretty much was the same as his sophomore year production. So yeah, post shoulder injury Bedard kind of went back to the way we saw, his second season, right? He didn't quite have the same level of pace in his game. The finishing wasn't quite there. I think he was forcing plays a bit too much. The turnovers are kind of coming back to him. His defensive game that I think was pretty good those first couple months of the year took a bit of a step back. He definitely reverted a bit back to some of those bad habits, right? I think maybe some of that's frustration with, kind of a lack of, running mates around him, that support not really being there. Another losing season, because the Hawks were in that kind of playoff conversation first half of the year. They weren't second half of the year. It was kind of back to that lottery race, bottom of standings race that they've been in the past few years. So I think Bedard, I think that hurt him a bit, whereas that same level of play wasn't quite there second half of the year, right? But so yeah, it was definitely a tale of two seasons for Connor Bedard, right? I think the first half of the year, the Bedard we saw the first half of the year, the Bedard we saw in the second half of the year were two different Connor Bedards. So I think the hope is going into next year in the 26-27 that he's going to have an entire offseason there to kind of keep rehabbing that shoulder. He decided not to play in the World Championships this year, Connor Bedard, right? He decided to opt out of the 2026 Worlds for the second year in a row. The reason being, he cited the injury, right? He wants to heal that injury. Plus, don't want to risk, getting injured again, right, or aggravating it as well. So I think for him, it makes sense to have another offseason like you did last year, where you take those extra months off. You take those extra time to kind of train and kind of work on your own individual game. I know him and Alvaro Moore have been spending time together in Florida. They've been working together, I know, this offseason, and yeah, Bedard's gonna be working hard. He's gonna be training hard. He had a really good offseason last year. If he can have another offseason last year like he did, and do that again this summer, this year, I think, that'd serve him well going into next season, right? You'd love to see Bedard get off to a similar start next year as a start he got off to this past year. I think that would go a long way. I think seeing that Bedard for a full year will go a long way, right? So yeah, but I think there's a lot of things to watch for Bedard this offseason, right? Because obviously, his contract is up now. He's off. His entry-level contract is off the books, so he's got to get re-signed this summer. And that's kind of a question, too, is what does that contract look like? What does the Connor Bedard contract look like? That's going to be something to monitor there. So pulling up Puckpedia here. Blackhawks have a lot of cap space. They have over $40 million of projected cap space to work with this offseason. Obviously, a good chunk of that's going to go towards Connor Bedard. But you look at this team here, right? A lot of the contracts that matter here in terms of these youth core players that Davidson's been drafting, he's got pretty good value so far, right? Look at Frank Nazar. His $6.6 million contract kicks in next season. If you look at Alex Vlasic, $4.6 million contract until 2030. You look at Spencer Knight, $5.8 million contract the next 3 years. So Davidson's already gotten pretty good value in a lot of these core players, right? To where you can afford to pay Connor Bedard, what he wants. So if Bedard's, taking a $13, $14 million contract, you're not going to complain about that. Look how much cap space you have. No team in the NHL has more cap space to work with than the Chicago Blackhawks. So I think, Bedard's a contract to where you're not really stressing too much about the number, especially if the cap space going up. Salary cap's going to go up another $8 million next year, right? It's going to keep going up over these next few years. So Hawks have the cap space to work with. I think the number one priority, you want Connor Bedard happy. You want Connor Bedard happy. Him and the team and Davidson have all expressed interest in resigning. That's not going to be an issue. Bedard will resign. Hopefully, it's a long-term contract. I think if we want to predict this contract, I'm going to guess, and this is a bit of a spitball, but I'm going to guess it's going to be a 6-7 year contract. Maybe not quite the full 8 years. This is the last year you could sign an 8-year contract extension, that being the max term. I think, next year it goes to 7 years being the max term. But I'm going to guess it's a 6-7 year contract for Bedard. I'm going to say the total is somewhere between $13, $14 million. So we'll call it 6 years, $13.5 million. We'll call it that. We'll see what happens. Hopefully they get done sooner rather than later. I think for the Blackhawks, the sooner you get done, the better. You don't want to let this hang over kind of the team's head over the entire summer, entire offseason. Bedard's birthday is coming up July 17th, so maybe they do it around then. Ideally, you like to get done before the draft, probably for agency. You probably like to have that done just so, the questions aren't being asked about and it's not being brought up. You'd probably rather get done then. Plus, so that way you know what Davidson knows what he has to work with this offseason, right? You probably want to get done before for the free agency trade period starts around draft day, Stanley Cup final coming to an end. So Davidson knows exactly how much cap space he has to work with this summer, right? Because Bedard's he's going to eat into that cap, right? If Bedard's signing for $13, $14 million, that gives you what, 28, 29 more million dollars to work with, to go towards, re-sign the rest of these guys you got to re-sign, whether that's Eli McKay if you want to bring him back. Take care of the RFAs here if we're going to sign Korchinski, EDM, Comesso, all those guys. And also, for the free agent market, it's probably going to be a dry market, but if there are some big fishes to go after, it gives you the money to go after those guys. And trades as well, Blackhawks should expect to be pretty active in the trades this summer, you would think. After quite a season last year, I think this year, the fact that, next year you're going into year 5, Davidson's 5-year plan, you're going into year 4, Bedard, the fact the Hawks haven't made the playoffs in 2020, I think, next year, Davidson, getting extended this offseason well, I think there's some pressure on this Blackhawks team to make a jump next year. Not to say they absolutely have to be in the playoffs, but they have to be in the conversation. They cannot be a lottery team once again next year. That will not be acceptable. They have to make a jump in the standings next year. I think absolutely they have to. Bedard's going to be freshly extended off a long-term deal. He's most likely going to be the captain. That's another thing to watch this summer. I think, Bedard most likely will be this team's next captain. I can't imagine anybody else would be. Who will the A's be, right? Vlasic, Nazar, Burt, we'll see. But Bedard should be this team's next captain, and it's going to be freshly extended on a long-term deal. And I think for Davidson, I think there's a lot of onus to having a busy offseason here. I think you can bring in that big fish via whether it's free agency trades. The draft's going to be a big one as well. The Hawks have the number 4 pick. What do they do with that 4 pick? Do they trade it? Do they trade it to kind of acquire that running mate for Bedard? We'll see what they do there. If they do keep the pick, what happens there? Does Ivar Stenberg end up dropping to 4? There's been a lot of mock drafts that had Stenberg drop to the 4. Not to give us false hope and be delusional here, but there is a reality that exists where next year's Blackhawks team could have Ivar Stenberg on it. So yeah, I think kind of to conclude this video here is kind of what can we expect out of Bedard next year? What can we expect out of him next year? And I think assuming it goes into next year and he's fully healthy, right? He's fully healthy, no more injuries, no more concerns with the shoulder there. He's freshly extended, so the contract isn't a worry anymore. He doesn't have to worry about the contract. No pressures of playing for an Olympic spot or anything like that. But I think Bedard said it too, where Blackhawks have to be in the playoff mix next year, and that's only going to happen. This team next year is going to go as far as Bedard takes it, right? He should have more support around him. He's going to have a full season of Anton Frundell. Whether he's playing center or wing, we'll see. That looks like the Hawks want to be the 2C, but they could play on the wing Bedard as well. You want to see Frank Nazar take that step forward next year. They're going to be Hawks having a full season of Nick Lardis next year, most likely. He played only half the season this past year. Who knows what happens to the draft as well, right? We don't know. Stenberg could be on this team next year for all we know. Who knows? You never know. So, and plus, Roman Cantrell's gonna be coming on the team as well. We know Cantrell's gonna be signing his seat at the Blackhawks pretty soon here. You have to think with the increased support around him. You shouldn't have to play with Burakovsky next year. Burakovsky should be bought out this offseason, right? Burakovsky should be bought out. Knock on wood there. Hopefully we see that. So yeah, between Kancherov, Frundell, Nazar, Lardis, Maybe Stenberg, we'll see. It might be delusional, but maybe Stenberg. Plus, we don't know what's going to happen for agency trades. We don't know who could be coming in, right? Does Davidson go after Matthew Nyes or Robert Thomas or or J. Rob or somebody of that ilk, or maybe somebody more realistic, because those guys might be a bit delusional. But who does he go after, right? We don't know exactly what this team's going to look like next year. So Bedard, bottom line, Bedard should have more talent around him next year. It's going to be year 4. He's going to be 21 years old. He has that experience under him. He's going to be fully healthy. Let's hopefully full 82-game season on Bedard next year. I think we want to see a fully healthy year for Bedard. If the pattern repeats itself, he should be fully healthy next year because he had injuries rookie year. Then he was healthy year 2, injury last year. So he should, if the pattern repeats itself, he should be fully healthy next year. I think I'm on nothing there, but yeah. Bottom line, Bedard, I think he's set up to have he's set up to have a successful season next year. I think this past year was a teaser trailer, right? He showed us a glimpse of what he could do. He showed us flashes of what he could do. He showed us a glimmer of that number 1 franchise player could be. He showed he could be the number 1 center, because that's another thing too, Bedard. There were question marks of whether he could be the number 1 center. I think he showed this year, no, that is a number 1 center. He improved in a lot of areas. His faceoffs got better. His defensive game got better. There's still areas that get better there. Don't get me wrong. Bedard could still get better defensively. He could still get better on the draws and the physicality and all that. There's still areas of his game that can get better, but I think Bedard's all-around game improved a lot as well this year, not just his production. So keep working on his all-around game. Keep getting better from that standpoint, all 3 zones. Stay healthy next year. With a better line mates and hopefully a Blackhawks team that should be considerably better next year in that playoff mix, in that conversation. I see no reason if Bedard stays healthy for 82 games, he can't hit 100 points next year. I think Bedard, he had 90-point pace this past year, which was a 23-point jump over the previous season, right? If he's fully healthy for 42 games, that's a 23-point jump. Why can't Bedard make another 20-point jump and be in that 100-point, 110-point Celebrini range this past year? I see no reason Bedard can't have the type of season that Celebrini had this year, next year, if he's fully healthy over 82 games. I think Bedard is that same level of player. I know, Celebrini might be ahead of him in the debates right now. But look, Bedard was doing what Celebrini was doing, first half of the year with lesser support around him, less line mates around him. I think with the team getting better around Bedard, that support getting better around Bedard, with all these draft picks that Davidson's been assembling coming into this team, right? The core is being assembled here. The kids, this is the kids' team now, right? It's going to be Bedard's team next year, in terms of the transition, the leadership transition. He's going to be the captain next year, right? This is next year's team is going to be the team of the future, right? The youth movement is under full swing here. So I think with Bedard, I think he's going to be set up for success next year, right? Past this, year 101, the Blackhawks past the centennial season, so no distractions there as well. But yeah, I think for this Blackhawks team, you want to see him in that push, make that push next year. If it's going to happen, it's going to come through. Number 1 reason it's going to come through Connor Bedard. He's got to be your MVP, right? Spencer Knight as well. He's got to have another big year as well. And you want to see these guys get better around him. You want to see that defense take a step. You want to see these defensemen take those steps forward. You want to see greater contributions outside Bedard as well. You can't just come through Bedard, because the fact that this team completely fell off the rails and fell off the tracks this year and Bedard got injured is it's not great, right? You want to be able to find a way to win without him as well, and he's not producing. So, but yeah, I think overall though this team will go as far as Bedard takes him. He is your franchise generational player. So if Bedard could stay healthy next year and produce at a 100+ point rate, be in that kind of hard conversation like Celebrini was this past year, which I think he's fully capable of doing. I think Bedard's fully capable of doing it. He was doing it for the first half of the year, and I think I see no reason why he can't next year. Right? I think he's going to be plenty motivated based off of the year this way. The way this year went, first half of the year is very promising. Second half of the year, not so much. We kind of reverted back to normal. But I think next year is going to be very motivated. I think this team's going to be very motivated. I think Bedard can absolutely take another step, another leap forward next year and be in that conversation. Take that, I think fully prove himself, right? Because Bedard, there's still some critics, right? There's still some critics of him in terms of the Macklin Celebrini debate. He's kind of been getting cooked there from right now. Let's be honest. Celebrini, he took that step forward. That this past season and was in the Olympics. He had a great run there, and he's playing in the Worlds right now for Canada and looking good as well there. So the Sharks took that step forward as well. So Celebrini, the Sharks are ahead right now. I think Bedard, the Blackhawks, they want to make inroads in that. They want to make inroads. I think that starts next year. I think next year's got to be the year where this team, fights back, right, and kind of put some of those media doubts to bed, right? I think next year is the year for this team to prove itself. I absolutely think it is. I think there's pressure on this team next year. I think next year is the first year there will be some actual pressure on this Blackhawks team. After 4 years of top 4 picks, after 4 years of being a bottom 3 team, I think next year's got to be the year this team takes that leap. I think 07-08 type season. I think it's got to be an 07-08 type season. 35-40 wins, 80, 90-ish points. They got to be in that mix. They got to be in that conversation. It's going to come through Bedard. If Bedard, is fully healthy next year, no injuries, no setbacks, and he's playing the way he did in October through November for a full season, I think this team can take that step forward. And I think, and I'm confident in Bedard, man. I believe in Bedard. I've always maintained my confidence in Bedard, but a lot of Blackhawks fans have it. But yeah, I think Bedard's got a lot to prove next year, man. Because like, there are still, he is one of those players. I think that there are a few players in the league that get critiqued more from the media than Bedard has, and I think he's still got a lot of guys. He's still got a lot to prove wrong. I think he's still got a lot of doubters to prove wrong. This team does as well. But I think Bedard can absolutely do it, man. I'm excited to see what he can do next year. It should be a fun season to watch for him. But yeah, no, I think that's all I got for this one. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Overall, like I did the team grades, but yeah, overall, if I had the grade Bedard's year, I'd give it an A. Not quite an A plus, right? It wasn't perfect. I think the one thing to work on as well for Bedard, things to work on for next year, consistency is a big one for as well, right? Because Bedard does go through stretches where when he's at his best, Bedard can do things that no other player in the league can do. He has that talent, he has that skill, where he can pull things off and no one else can. But he does go through cold stretch as well. There are some games where he's noticeably off, and you don't really notice him that much, and he does make some mistakes. So I think for Bedard, the big thing to work on next year is consistency for him, and I think fatigue as well, because it does seem like sometimes for Bedard, as the season wears along, it does feel like sometimes he loses a step. So I think next year as well, keep working on that conditioning and that endurance to where for a full 82 games, you could see the same kind of Bedard from game 1 to game 82, and that's important for him, especially if the team is going to make that playoff push. If they're in the playoffs, you want to see Bedard have gas up in the tank come playoff time. So that's going to be important as well. But no, overall for Bedard, he gets an A. I think this was easily his best year in the NHL. Definitely the best year since his rookie year. Much better than his sophomore year. And I think he's poised and in a position next year to have a true breakout season next year. I think this year was kind of a breakout year, but I think next year is that true breakout into that #1 star player that I think that he was pegged to be, right? He was pegged to be, that a guy who could be among the best players in the NHL, right? I think next year you're going to see him in that conversation. I think you're going to see him in that hard conversation like Celebrini was this past year, because I think Bedard can be as good, if not better than Celebrini. I still believe in that, right? He's been being so far. Celebrini's adjusted a bit quicker to him in the show so far, but I think Bedard has the skill and the talent, to still be that guy, to be that #1 player. And I hope he shows it next year and puts these debates to bed. If I see any more Bedard, Leo Carlson debates, I'm going to lose my mind, man. It's unreal. If anything, Bedard's become underrated. Maybe at one point he was overrated, but I think Bedard's become underrated of how much that guy's been slandered. Because I think he's just, the expectations placed him are probably a bit too large, but I still think he can live up to him, and I'm excited to see what he can do next year and beyond, man. I'm excited to see the C on his chest. It's going to look good on him. Excited to see him lead this team. I think it's going to be a lot to prove for him in the squad next year. So, but yeah, that's all I got for this one. Yeah, and we'll see if we make this a series. We'll see if we make this a series again. We won't do it for every Blackhawks player, but for the ones that matter, for the core players, I'll consider doing a little season review, things they can work on, and kind of expectations for next year. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, feel free to like it and subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and hype the video. That would help me out a lot as well. But yeah, thank you all so much for the support. And also, yeah, before I go, I also started a Discord. I got a link to my Discord in my bio. If you go on my YouTube bio, you'll see a link there in the link section. So feel free to join my Discord if you want a place to kind of talk Blackhawks NHL hockey with the rest of the Behawk community. That would be greatly appreciated. All right, so I got for this one. Justin Lynch, Behawk memes out, and we'll see you on the next one, baby. A lot of fun content cooking in the works. We got a lot of fun content in the works. I got a fun video planned for the end of this week, so keep a lookout for that. I got some fun guests to have on pretty soon here, so definitely keep a lookout for that. But anyway, so I got for this one. Justin Lynch, Behawk memes out, and we'll see you on the next one, baby. Absolute Pookie. Boop.